Jason, the NBA trade deadline is coming up very quickly. We are just now under 2 days away. It is Thursday afternoon. You wrote an article in The Athletic this weekend that kind of got buried due to all the other chaos that happened in the NBA with the Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis trade. But do you want to explain to the people what you foresee the Cavs' most likely outcome on Thursday being? And then I'll tell you why I either agree or disagree.
I don't think they're going to make a big splash move at the deadline. I think what you see is what you get with this roster. I do think that they need to try and duck out of the tax. We've talked about it repeatedly on the show. They're a couple million over the tax line right now. And if you get out of the tax and if you wait to start the clock until next year, it buys you an extra year before you hit repeat offender status. When the tax penalties become even more punitive, when everything begins to skyrocket on you. And a bad combination to me is the repeat offender clock starting in 27-28, which is what it will do. If they stay in the tax this year, they'll be classified as repeat offenders in 27-28. And that's when a new Donovan Mitchell contract would begin. And I was told the other day that could start around $65 million. So that's a lot of money that will be coming out of Dan Gilbert's pocket. And it's not that he doesn't want to pay it. It's that everybody has a limit to all of this. And teams like Boston are going to start to hit that pressure point this summer, with where their contracts are going. So the solution to that out of me is if you trade Tristan Thompson and Sam Merrill into another team's cap space, it doesn't have to be in the same deal. You can break them up. You can put them in separate deals. The one good thing about the CBA this year is they changed the rules so that you can trade a player into a mid-level exception. You can never do that before. So now it just creates more trade partners. It creates more avenues for, a team like Utah could take on the money, I think, with no problem. That's how they got involved in the Luka deal. Yep. And you dump a couple of twos, dump some money on them, and get under the tax. And then once you're under the tax, Danny LaRue is our cap guy at The Athletic. He's really, really good with this stuff. And I was talking to Danny a little bit last week and said, would this get them under? And he said, yes, that if you if you trade Tristan, if you trade Sam Merrill, it gets you out of the tax. And then you can add two veterans. In the way that the buyout contracts are structured, they're basically prorated for the end of the season.
Yeah.
And so it's like $1 million. So that gets you under the line. So you're out of the tax. You can go add, Ben Simmons was the name that I used. I do think the Cavs like Ben. I think they've been connected to him for a couple of years. People can roll their eyes at that, but Ben here on a buyout contract with no pressure on him is a lot different than the situations he's been in the past. He can come in here with no pressure and no expectations, and then just see how it looks, see how it goes. So that's what I would do. I know it sucks losing Tristan. It sucks losing Sam Merrill, but what other option do you have? Like they're a product of their own success.
Yeah.
And it's a good problem to have, but it's still a problem that they need to solve.
Bobby Marks tweeted this out the other day, Jason, and I thought it was fascinating. But there are 12 teams over the luxury tax currently in the NBA as of today. And the luxury tax payment is different for everyone. So the Cavs are over $1.9 million.
Yep.
It would cost Dan Gilbert $2.9 million in what he has to pay in luxury tax. Do you know how much in luxury tax payment alone, not salary cap, not player, just the luxury tax payment, the Phoenix Suns are in line to pay this season?
I can't wait to hear this because I don't know how much.
$164.3 million.
Oh my God.
In just luxury tax. The Timberwolves are second with $84.8 million. The Bucks third, $74.8. Celtics fourth, $65.6. The Lakers, this was before the Luka deal, so I'm going to skip that number. The Knicks, $36.5, and so on and so forth. The Pelicans are just 1.4 over. That's going to cost them 2.1. I mentioned the Cavs again. They are 1.9 million over. It'll cost Dan Gilbert 2.9 million, which is palatable. 164.3 million in straight luxury tax is not palatable for any owner because that's on top of paying the entire roster. And it's one thing if you're number one in the West and a legitimate title contender, you could tell yourself, okay, whatever. Suns aren't there right now, right, Jason?
No.
And it's not just this year. It's the repeat offender effect that then multiplies that number by even more that the Cavs want to avoid. I think, and I said last week, chaos presents opportunities for Cleveland. I don't think they're going to go out and make the Cam Johnson trade that we proposed last week. And I don't think they're going to be in the market to turn a bunch of their assets into one player or two players that they think could help them. I just don't foresee that being the path they choose. But I do think there's an opportunity because the Mavericks still need some sort of guard/wing help. The Lakers need a center badly. There's the whole Jimmy Butler saga. The Golden State Warriors are reportedly incredibly active right now at the deadline. Kevin Durant could be traded from Phoenix. I think there's a chance that the Cavs could be the third team that helps facilitate one of those deals. And if that's the instance, Jason, I think they could turn a couple of their bottom of the roster assets into a much better player than they probably are worth. But because it's helping facilitate the deal, it could be an opportunity for Cleveland that we don't see on paper yet. So I do think there is a chance something like that happens. I wouldn't expect it, but I do agree with you. If they're not going to make a splash move and there isn't a 3-team trade that presents itself, as good as this team is and as tight as this team is, and I'm telling you, Jason, I went to the Max Strus charity event yesterday. Every player on the roster was there. Kenny was there. Kobe was there. There was 4 or 5 assistant coaches there. There were the warm-up guys that the player development staff was there. The front office. Incredible turnout to a charity event. This is a tight-knit group. But this tight-knit, overlap the financial ramifications when you could be in the middle of a championship window. And that's my answer is going to be no to that 100 out of 100 times.
It's a tough spot. Like, there is no easy.
I don't envy Kobe.
No. And, we talked months ago about this, and I said, the one thing you can't do is stay where you're at. Like, if you're going to go into the tax, go into the tax. Make a move, upgrade your roster, and really go into the tax. Or get out. What you don't want to do is just sit where you're at. But now that we're at the deadline, if they do sit where they're at, and they, like, I get it from a chemistry standpoint, I guess. I get why they don't want to mess with it and not necessarily cut even someone who on court is not as, I understand Sam had a great game the other night, but typically you're not counting on Sam Merrill to give you big production with this team. But I get it from not wanting to alter the chemistry of this group. But I still think I would try and get out of the tax. And the other thing worth mentioning, 2 things on this, 2 totally different topics. One, the culture that they have built here, I didn't think was possible.
Yeah. Like, kudos to them for that. Seriously.
When LeBron was leaving, I remember going on 92.3 saying, like, this will be as good as the Cavs have it. Like, they'll never be this good again. And that's why I was frustrated with how the LeBron era ended, because it just felt like they were not taking advantage of the greatest player in the world being here. And it felt like, what are you trying to rebuild for? Because you're never going to get it back to this level. And I mean, they haven't won anything yet. They haven't made it beyond the second round. But what they have built is you get guys now re-signing. First of all, you're getting free agents to come here. Max Strus, that never happened before. You got Donovan to re-sign. And there's a lot of factors, I think, that went into that, but he signed the contract. And that never happened before. And now you're getting calls from guys that want to come here on buyouts. If you think the buyout conversation doesn't start until after the trade deadline, then you're naive.
You're very wrong. Yeah.
So the buyout conversations are already taking place. And you've got guys, like, they have created a culture here that people want to be part of. And I didn't think that was possible. Because and not just NBA. I've talked to Guardians people. You have a really hard time getting people who want to come here. Like, Cleveland's not a destination. The Browns have their own set of issues, well beyond the city, and why they have trouble attracting people to come here. But it's been a repetitive theme on all the teams in town of guys don't want to come here, guys don't want to come here, guys don't want to be here. We have to really sell it over the top because guys don't want to be here. And they've done, like, they did it. I don't know how they did it, but they've turned Cleveland into a place in the NBA. Yeah, if you give guys that you want to be in LA or Cleveland, well, LA is probably going to win that every time. But they have turned Cleveland into a destination where guys will say, "Yeah, I'll go play there," and that's a credit to them. And then, secondly, completely off that topic, as we're talking about deadline moves and tax and bills and all that. you mentioned the $3 million that they would have to pay in penalties, $3 million total in being over the tax and in penalties. I was talking to Danny about this, and he doesn't. Danny LaRue, our cap guy at the Athletic, sorry, and he said, he believes that teams, maybe like a Phoenix, teams will dip out of the second apron, which will lessen the tax burden. Teams may dip out entirely, like the Cavs. So the number is still in flux. But last year, teams who did not pay into the tax received a payout of about $12 million.
It's set to be 15.7 right now.
And I think that's probably going to go down. And that was his point, that's probably going to go down as teams get out of the tax. But even at 12, let's call it 12 because that's what last year's number was. That's a $15 million swing. Yeah. You go from paying 3 to receiving 12. And people will say, oh, it's Dan Gilbert. Dan Gilbert didn't care about money. Okay. It's still $15 million. Like, if somebody wants to tell you can save $3 million and you can bend over and pick up 12, would you do it? I would. I don't care how much money I have. I'd bend over and pick up an extra 12, especially when it's not hurting the core of the team. So there's a lot of reasons why I think it's wise for them to get out of the tax this year. And it has nothing to do with whether or not he wants to pay the tax. This is not that conversation. Of course he would pay the tax. He will pay the tax. He'll pay it next year. And for many, many years after.
Well, sorry to cut you off, but that's the point. They could avoid it this year to stop the clock. They can't avoid it next year.
Correct.
And they can't avoid it in 27 or 28 or 29 while the rest of the guys are under contract. If you're going to avoid the tax, this is your only plausible opportunity to be under to stop the repeater clock. There is no, well, next year, if we're not as good, we can. No, it doesn't work like that because your starting salaries of the core 4 basically bring you to the luxury tax number by itself. So you're playing 4 on 15 every night, which is not legal, or you get under this year, which is why I do think the right move is to get under this year. With that being said, Jason, I'm not going to lie. If Kobe Altman decides to do nothing at the deadline and the Cavs decide this team, this chemistry, we're not messing with it, I would personally think it's a mistake, but I wouldn't crush them. And in 2 years, if they have to make some sort of ridiculous roster move to get under because they can't afford it, I'll crush them then. But the way this team's playing with how close-knit and tight this team is, I would understand the hesitancy to do anything. I don't necessarily agree with it. I'm looking more big picture than this year.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't crush Kobe for not doing something.
No, I wouldn't either. And, we've had this argument on the show, and we've talked in Bulls, like, you got to go now. Go now. Like, now's your opportunity to win. And I agree with that. And there was a time where a month or 6 weeks ago, I probably would have said, just push, just go. But I don't think that there's a trade out there right now. Like, you need to make a trade. And I don't know that there's a trade out there right now that makes them dramatically better. I mean, we've run through how many trade scenarios on the show, and a lot of them feel like just making a trade for the sake of making a trade.
The Cam Johnson's the only situation where if you could finagle Cam Johnson from the Nets, you go do it. And if you can't, excuse me, unless there's some 3-team deal like we mentioned where maybe the Lakers can give you Rui Hachimura to help them get it. Like, those are so difficult to predict. I don't want to say there's one out there and one not because we have no idea. But unless Cam Johnson is truly available and the Cavs have the assets to get him, I don't know what kind of 1-for-1 trade or one player bringing in for 3 or 4 that go out truly make the Cavs a significantly better team and a more viable championship threat. So I get it. I do not envy Kobe's position. He's in a very, very difficult spot here.
Yeah, I don't think there's a trade. Aside, the Cam thing would be great. I don't know realistically that there's a trade out there that they can make right now that makes them dramatically better. So pivot and get under the tax. Stop the clock. Don't start the clock. Worry about that next year. Next year when Evans' extension kicks in, you are a tax team. You are officially on the clock. And you have 3 to 4 years to win a championship before you have some really, really hard decisions to make.